The Consequence of Ignorance. A Datura trip report by Shiggity Schlade, posted to earwid.org March 13, 2010. Before I begin the actual story of the trip, I'd like to give you, the reader, a look at what happened leading up to the time of ingestion. It won't take long, but it gives you a better understanding of how my entire personality had changed due to the ingestion of the drug. I was at my cousin's house with a friend. For now, we'll call my cousin Mark and the friend Mo. We showed up at Mark's house at about 9. I met Mo there and we ended up taking turns at playing SOCOM in the living room, ripping on each other for no apparent reason, and eating what was left of the food in the house. Me and Mo went into the bedroom, because there was cable in there and he wanted to ask me something in particular. He asked me if I wanted to get messed up. I was always down, but we had to walk somewhere to get them. We then walked out, rode our bikes down to Main Street, and picked a few seed pods of something we had no idea the origin of. We headed back to the house, and throwing caution to the wind, I took 2 pods full of seeds with a glass of water. Him being much smaller and never having any experience with any kind of drugs, I only took 1. Mo weighs only about 140 pounds. It only seemed right that he took a smaller dose than I. I then laid down on the bed and stared up at the spinning ceiling fan. From this point on, I'm going to tell you what I remember, and what witnesses told me had happened. About 20 minutes after ingestion, I started feeling strange. I felt good though. I thought it was similar to the effects of smoking marijuana, but it really wasn't. The only similarity between the two is all of the sudden I had bad cotton mouth. I got a glass of water and went outside to check if my uncle had any snuff in the truck. He did, and I put in a pinch of Copenhagen. At this point, I felt very odd. I was stumbling around and slurring my words, sweating more than usual for the current temperature. I couldn't handle the small chew I had, and started to gag because of the extreme lack of moisture in my mouth. I took it out, stumbled back into the house and grabbed another glass of water. Went back into the bedroom and lay down on the bed, watching the ceiling fan once again. All of a sudden, a hazy purple spot started appearing on the ceiling. I was intrigued by this, so I stayed and watched them for a while. Time after ingestion, roughly 1 hour. Mo entered the room and asked if it was okay to turn the lights off. I had my fill of the purple haze, so I agreed to the blackout. I closed my eyes and it was like a laser show. Images of random objects drifted in and out of sight, while circular designs danced in the background. From here on, what I remember will be in quotes, and what happened that I have no recollection of will be in stars. The following will be in chronological order to the best of my abilities. At this point, I was drenched in sweat, so I was inclined to take off my shirt. I then went to the bathroom to splash water on my face, and ended up completely undressing. I had no idea where Mo was, nor what he was doing. I was naked in the bathroom, and I started throwing punches. Hard punches. I was boxing anything in the bathroom that wasn't bolted down. According to Mark, my uncle was awoken by the noise and got up to check. All of a sudden, I was shirtless in the living room, sitting on the couch looking up at Mark and my parents. I was disoriented, not sure of where I was at all. All I did was what my parents asked me to, which was put on my shoes and shirt and get in the car. I got up to walk out the door. I was driven back to my house in the country. I'm not sure what words were exchanged between me, my mother and my father, but I doubt there were any at all. I came to on another couch, mine, looking up at my father, who didn't look particularly disappointed, but more amused at my odd and silly behaviour. I kept on having this sudden urge to get up, yet every time I attempted to, my father's stern voice chimed in saying, "Stay down, don't get up." I kept trying and he started to laugh as every time I got up, I'd sheepishly sit down. I felt like I was 9 years old, doing as I was told or I'd be sent to my room, or worse, the corner. After many attempts, I thought I'd go at it at a different angle. "I have to pee," I said. He looked at me with a warm smile and took my hand and helped me to the bathroom. I felt secure for some reason. I wasn't able to stand, so as I sat, my dad snickered in the doorway. I looked up at him again, wondering why I kept feeling younger and more helpless as the time passed. "I can't go. Stop laughing," I said. He then helped me up and put me back on the couch. I sat and strained my ears to hear the conversation that went on between him and my mother in the other room. I kept hearing horrifying words like die and hospital and overdose. It's important to note at this point that in the crazy religion my family is part of, we don't go to the doctors whatsoever. They believe in healing through prayer. So if there was talk of a hospital visit, something bad was happening. I remember my father coming back in from the kitchen and taking my hand. I blacked out once again. I was rushed to the neighbouring town's hospital. Most parents did the same and we arrived at around the same time. I was rushed in and had an IV stuck in me. Well, they tried to stick me anyways. After the 5th attempt, the floor was spotted with blood and had something being pumped through my veins. I was being extremely violent. At one point I even punched the doctor in the face and broke his glasses. This is when they decided that it would be best for me and other people's safety if I was restrained. I was tied to a bed and force-fed charcoal. It was not an easy task, but after about an hour they had it done. I was given a new IV with some other kind of medical bullshit in it to calm me down. With my face, chest and neck covered in black coal residue, I finally found sleep. I came to with people surrounding me. It was a new day and peculiar things were happening. My grandmother, who does not smoke, was holding a lit cigarette. I had my sister lean down to ask her if she was smoking. She responded with a simple, "No, jackass, Grandma doesn't smoke." I looked around the room to see where I was and why I was tied down. A white board on the opposite wall read, "You're in the hospital, you're okay. It's the current date and no one is going to hurt you." The nurse apparently did this because during my blackouts, I was violent, quixotic and angry. I looked around the room for some familiar faces and found some. My whole family was there. While restrained, I was able to look under my blanket. I was fully naked and there was a tube coming out of my penis. I found this odd because I'd never been to a hospital and had no idea what a catheter even was. I looked up at my IV bag and it was an ear of corn. It started growing features and it soon became an ear of corn with a face. My father then asked what I was looking at, and I turned to address him confidently. "Cornhead," I said with a very serious look. I looked around the room at all the odd things happening around me. A money clip with a $10 bill in it was laying next to a small fish on the ceiling. I thought this was amazing, so I had to tell the nearest person about it. Once again, this was my sister. She looked up like the dumbass she is and said there was nothing there. I asked my mother if this sexy bondage was really necessary. She laughed and untied my hands. My feet were still restrained though at this point. All of a sudden, the room fell away around me, and I was once again back at Mark's house. I had a PS2 controller in my hand playing Soakum. 5 minutes of playing had passed, and the controller melted into a soft cotton material. I kept on apologising to Mark, saying, I'm so sorry, over and over again. I opened my eyes and I was back in the hospital. The controller was now a blanket, which I was clutching very tightly in my hands. I felt scared and vulnerable and began to weep. Everyone that was close to me came and bid their well wishes. They chatted with me, or tried to chat with the nonsense coming out of my mouth, and promptly left. I came to, and it was dusk. My sister approached me and gave me a hug, took my shoes off of me. She had to lift the blanket a bit to get them, and I thought she was going to expose my naked body to the few people still in the hospital room. No, don't look under there. They took my clothes and stuffed me in a dark tube, I said. She had a laugh and said she had to go, and did just that. It was dark again now. I drifted in and out of consciousness for the better part of an hour. My aunt was at my bedside and all of a sudden, large centipedes and bugs started coming out of her ears. I was distraught, so I turned my attention to anything but her. The bugs had now filled the room and were crawling over everything. I screamed for help and my mother came to comfort me. She embraced me and told me to close my eyes. I cried, hard. Then I slept. I woke up a bit later. No more than half an hour had actually passed. And then something caught my eye. A naked woman outside my window, dancing. She was beautiful. I remember telling myself, as soon as my mum's asleep, I'm going out there and fucking the shit out of her regardless of this catheter. I passed out before she did, and now I realise it was obviously a hallucination. I awoke the next day to more well wishes. Then there was Boxy. Boxy was a gnome about the size of my thumb. He'd climbed down from the curtainer in my bed and posted up on my shoulder. He reminded me of the Travelocity gnome. I was captivated. I had the most excited look on my face as he smiled at me. Then he winked and mouthed, "Watch this," and then started to jump up and down on my shoulder. I was overjoyed and started chanting, "Jump, Boxy, jump," to the enjoyment of my current audience. I was out of it. I said things to my family that I'm not proud of. Told my grandmother to eat a dick. Told my aunt she needed to get fucked hard. And I called my other grandmother a whore. I then went out of it again. The walls melted away and I was in my room holding my guitar. I started playing and once again, it melted into a blanket. I was angry. I threw a fit. Kept repeating, "Fuck, fuck, what the fuck?" More well wishes came, more cards and more bullshit. I came to and it was night. I looked to the window and the woman was gone. In her place was a large man in a long trench coat and fedora. He looked at me and pulled out an old 50s Thompson. He began firing through the window and I lost it. I hysterically started crying, but again, my mother was there to comfort me. I fell asleep in her embrace. I awoke the next day and felt normal again. No hallucinations, no mad psychobabble, just normality. The nurse came in and deflated the balloon in my catheter and pulled it out, which hurt like a motherfucker. I was able to clothe myself, get up and walk to the bathroom and take a shit. I looked in the mirror and had black all over me. It was like I was the first one to pass out at a party and someone had found a Sharpie. I met Mo at the facility's shower and he looked like hell. He then told me all the bad things that he saw on his trip. At one point, he awoke to his room full of dead bodies, hanging on nooses from his ceiling. I felt bad for him. I felt bad for both of us. We had taken Datura, or Jimson weed, without researching it first, and paid dearly for it. I'd lost 3 days of my fall break and hours of my life that I have no recollection of. The reason I was in the hospital for so long is because my heart almost exploded because of how high its heart rate was. I hope that by writing this, that I've helped inform you in some way. Another fantastically engrossing Datura trip report. Something that was exemplified in this report that I find really fascinating about the whole Datura experience is how quickly the tone of the experience can change based on the hallucinations and your reaction to them. So, when the large centipede and bug started spilling out of his auntie's ears, he was naturally quite distraught. I mean, fuck me, I would be. And then, barely any time later, he has the experience of the gnome and has this sort of jovial, childlike reaction to it. He's sort of in a state of wonder. It's just so interesting how it can go from literal nightmare hellscape to sort of this, childlike experience of just pure joy and amazement. And then, just quickly after that, he'll completely just lose it and start fucking throwing all these insults at his grandma to then to chong on a fucking penis. Which is it's just insane, isn't it? Reading it, it's sort of like twistedly comedic in a sense. There is this sort of sense of like a cosmic joke, and the joke can get very messed up and seriously disturbed. There is no limits to how fucked up it can be. But yeah, it's interesting how your reactions to it sort of are very unexpected. There's a lot of Datura trip reports of people literally seeing like blood orgies with demons and people like Superman committing suicide. I remember that in one of the trip reports. He actually crucifies himself, which is just absolutely messed up. But a lot of the times when people write about, not all the time, because a lot of the time it is just literally traumatic and it's very much literal hell on earth type experience. Sometimes people actually react to it in sort of just a comedic way, where they just see it as like a joke and they don't take it very seriously. They believe it's completely real as well, which is interesting. When if I would imagine if I believed it was completely real, I would fucking lose my head. But sometimes the effect that the delirium that you're in can sort of make you just laugh it off when it's this mental thing you're experiencing. But that's also not the case, and that's why Datura, not only is it physically damaging, like this guy literally, his heart literally almost exploded, but it can also be extremely mentally traumatizing because it completely shatters your perception of reality, and it's probably a surefire way of experiencing depersonalization, derealization, once you come back to your sober state. Again, I have to emphasize that this is just something you should not be doing at all. I'm completely against delirium use in any respect, and a lot of also sort of like messed up dissociatives as well, where they're not only damaging to your mind but also body as well. It's not worth risking it at all. I keep saying to people that just have some patience. I know a lot of the reason people say like take Datura and Benadryl and all these messed up delirium type drugs is because they don't have access to psychedelics and they're sort of gagging to experience this altered state, and it's the classic case of curiosity killed the cat, and they end up completely messing themselves up. Quite literally at the beginning, his mate was like, "Hey, do you want to get fucked up?" And they go and pick some Datura seed pods, and they had absolutely no idea what it even was. They'll just heard somewhere that these things can get you messed up, and they'll just thought like, "Oh, anything that gets me messed up is going to be a good time." I've taken weed, I've smoked weed or done anything like that before. Probably anything that gets me high is going to be pleasurable, and it's really not, because there's a whole spectrum of these substances, and the experiences it can give you are wildly different. It can really mess you up, and I assume that this person was very young, and these sort of psychoactive substances that are very dangerous can have serious life-lasting consequences if you take them at a young age, let alone even if you take them at 40 and you're taking bare Datura seeds and your fucking heart starts imploding. That's already going to be bad enough. But doing it so young, it really just leaves this sort of like dark cloud over your life that eventually you're going to have to process, because it's going to be a source of trauma for you. So please just don't do this, whatever age you are, even if you're fucking 100 years old on your deathbed and you're like, "Hey, fancy getting some Datura down me, lad." Please don't be doing that whatsoever, because that'll make me very upset. Another intriguing part of this report was the fact that his parents are so devoutly Christian. I assume they're Christian. I mean, they fucking love them Bibles in America. And they were so against going to the hospital, they just believed in like healing through prayer. But I think they even realised just how messed up the situation was, that there's no prayers that can cure the Datura demons or get rid of them. So take them to the classic material hospital and see what they can do. Fucking jam some charcoal in his mouth. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was that even though he had this IV stuck in him that was feeding him all these drugs to calm him down, and having the charcoal and all these other procedures, that he still ended up having all these nightmarish hallucinations, and it makes you wonder what would have happened if he didn't go to hospital. How messed up would his trip have been? I mean, you already ended up experiencing all these hellish things and just really disturbing stuff, like the naked woman dancing outside his window, which, funnily enough, he must be some very horny teenager who was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna fuck this shit out of her." Like, mate, if you saw some dancing naked woman outside your window, that'd be absolutely fucked. But like I said before, on Datura, you just don't know what your reaction is going to be to any of these experiences. That's why it's sort of so scary, because it is possibly the most unpredictable of substances, along with, say, salvia, which again sort of has this like twisted comedic feeling to it. But Datura is definitely a lot more on the strictly sinister side. It's just so fascinating. I cannot get enough of Datura trip reports. There is in a lot of them, there also is like these malicious sexual overtones to them. A lot of them experience these blood orgies and sort of like this marriage of pain and suffering and joy and pleasure, and all meshed together into this weird sort of amalgamation of every thought, feeling and emotion like human can experience, and then manifested physically and visually in front of you. Absolutely just messed up, innit? It reminds me of like fucking Berserk, mate, with all like Hellraiser with the Cenobites that sort of feed on people's pain. And yeah, like the God Hand in Berserk, where Slan, the big massive breasted member of the God Hand sort of feeds on the sexual suffering of people and finds it arousing. And yeah, that's sort of, there's an air of that in these Datura trip reports. I never know whether to say Datura or Datura. I can probably pronounce it better with me Northern accent like with Datura. So I don't know, fucking, you just don't know with me, do you? You never know. You'll never know what I'm gonna do next. So yeah, don't really have anything else much to say about this. Hope this guy, I mean, this is over 13 years ago. I wonder what he's doing now. I hope he's never done it again, and that he's never encountered Cornhead. Fuck me, Cornhead sounds like a Razorhead on Datura, pretty much. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll do some more Datura trip reports in the future because they're just too entertaining not to cover.